Why do you smell like another man? Jin Hyuk was waiting in the penthouse at 3:13 p.m. Rage barely controlled in his eyes. Laura thought she could keep her job interview a secret from her Mafia boss employer. She was wrong. Jin Hyuk had been watching her every move for 6 months, losing his mind with obsession every time she smiled at someone else. And when David Chen, charming, legitimate, everything Jin Hyuk wasn't, walked into his penthouse and made Laura laugh in 5 minutes, he did the most insane thing possible. Welcome to another mind-blowing story, my amazing viewers. This one promises to keep you glued to your screen. Kindly tell us where you're watching from. Laura pushed open the heavy door, her shoulders aching from the weight of possibility. The job interview had gone well, better than she'd expected, and for the first time in 6 months, she'd glimpsed a future that didn't revolve around polishing marble countertops and pretending not to notice the dangerous men who came and went from her employer's home. She barely had time to set down her bag before his voice cut through the silence. Why do you smell like another man? Laura's blood turned to ice. Jin Hyuk stood in the doorway of his office, backlit by the golden light streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows. At 32, he was a study in controlled violence, sharp jawline, darker eyes that could strip a person to their core, and a presence that made even his most hardened associates nervous. 6 months of working for him had taught Laura to read the subtle shifts in his demeanor, the flex of his fingers when he was annoyed, the way his accent thickened when he was angry, the dangerous stillness that preceded an explosion. Right now, every line of his body screamed threat. "Excuse me?" Laura's voice came out steadier than she felt. She'd been raised in Chicago, had learned early how to face down intimidation with her chin up and her spine straight. She wouldn't cower, not even for him. Jin Hyuk moved with predatory grace, crossing the space between them in measured steps. His nostrils flared as he circled her, and Laura realized with mounting horror that he was actually smelling her, cataloging every foreign scent that clung to her clothes. The restaurant kitchen, the manager's cologne, the grease and garlic that had permeated everything. "Don't play games with me, Laura." His voice was dangerously quiet, the kind of quiet that preceded bloodshed in his world. "I can smell him on you. Who is he?" Heat flooded her cheeks, part indignation, part something more complicated that she refused to examine. "That's none of your business. I work for you, Jin Hyuk. I clean your home, I prepare your meals, but what I do on my day off is my own concern." His jaw clenched so hard she could see the muscle jump beneath his skin. "Everything about you is my business." The possessiveness in those words sent a shiver down her spine that had nothing to do with fear, and everything to do with the tension that had been building between them for months. The lingering glances when he thought she wasn't looking, the way his fingers would brush hers when he handed her his coffee cup, the nights she'd heard him pacing in his room while she lay awake in her own. "I had a job interview," she said finally, hating how defensive she sounded. "The manager shook my hand and showed me around the kitchen, that's all." Something dangerous flickered in Jin Hyuk's eyes. Not relief. Worse. "A job interview," he echoed. Laura tried to move past him, to retreat to the sanctuary of her small room off the kitchen, but Jin Hyuk was having none of it. He followed her through the penthouse like a storm cloud, his presence oppressive and inescapable. Who was this manager? What restaurant? The questions came rapid fire, each one more invasive than the last. How long did you spend with him? Did he touch you beyond the handshake? Stop it. Laura grabbed the cleaning supplies from the hall closet with more force than necessary, her hands trembling with a volatile mixture of anger and something she didn't want to name. "You're being ridiculous. Answer me." His voice had taken on that edge she'd heard him use with subordinates who'd disappointed him, and it lit a fire in her chest. She spun to face him, supplies forgotten. "Why? Why does it matter to you if I interview for another job? Why do you care if some random restaurant manager touched my hand?" She took a step toward him, emboldened by months of swallowed frustration. "I'm your maid, not your property, not your girlfriend, not your anything except an employee who should be free to leave whenever she wants." Jin Hyuk moved so fast she didn't have time to react. One moment there was space between them. The next he had her backed against the kitchen counter, his hands gripping the marble on either side of her body, caging her in. The heat of him was overwhelming, the scent of his cologne, expensive and distinctly him, flooding her senses. "You don't need another job." His face was inches from hers, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes, could feel his breath against her cheek. "I pay you well. More than well. You have your own room, your own bathroom. Freedom to come and go as you please. Why isn't that enough?" Laura's heart hammered against her ribs. She should be terrified. This was Jin Hyuk, the man whose name made grown men pale, whose reputation for ruthlessness preceded him into every room. But terror wasn't what flooded her system as his body heat seeped into her skin. "Because I need independence," she said, proud that her voice didn't shake even as her hands did. "I need options that don't involve you controlling every aspect of my life. I need to know that I'm staying here because I choose to, not because I'm trapped." She pressed her palms against his chest, meaning to shove him away, but the moment her hands connected, with the solid wall of muscle beneath his expensive shirt, something shifted. His eyes darkened, his breath caught, and for one suspended moment, the world narrowed to just the two of them. "Trapped?" The word came out raw, almost wounded. "Is that what you think this is?" The vulnerability in his expression gutted her. This was the man who'd brought her tea without being asked when she'd been sick with the flu, who'd insisted she take Sundays off even though she'd said it wasn't necessary, who'd stood between her and a drunk associate who'd made an inappropriate comment, his voice arctic with threat. "I don't know what this is," Laura admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I know it can't continue like this. I can't continue like this." Jin Hyuk's hands released the counter, but instead of stepping back, they moved to frame her face, his touch surprisingly gentle for hands that had ended lives. "Then tell me what you want this to be." Laura took one long look at him and walked back to her room. Midnight found Laura staring at the ceiling of her small room, counting the shadows cast by the Seoul city lights filtering through her curtain. Sleep was impossible with her mind replaying that moment in the kitchen on an endless loop. Jin Hyuk's hands framing her face, his question still unanswered, the weight of 6 months of tension threatening to crush her chest. The knock on her door came at 12:47 a.m. 3 precise raps she recognized instantly. "Laura." His voice was rough, stripped of its usual authority. "Please, I need to talk to you." She should have refused, should have called through the door that it was late, that this was inappropriate, that whatever he needed could wait until morning. Instead, she found herself opening the door to find Jin Hyuk still in his dress shirt and slacks, though the top buttons were undone and his sleeves were rolled to his elbows. He looked wrecked in a way she'd never seen him, hair disheveled as though he'd been running his fingers through it repeatedly, eyes dark with something that looked like desperation. "My study," he said quietly. Not a command, a request. The study was Jin Hyuk's sanctuary, a room of dark wood and leather where he conducted the business he kept carefully separated from her world. Laura had cleaned it hundreds of times but had never been invited to sit in one of the butter-soft chairs facing his massive desk. Now, Jin Hyuk gestured to one while he moved to the bar cart, his movements uncharacteristically uncertain. "Whiskey." He held up a crystal decanter containing amber liquid that probably cost more than her monthly salary. "No, thank you." He poured himself a generous measure and took a long swallow before turning to face her. The desk remained between them, a barrier he seemed to need. "I owe you an explanation, or an apology. Maybe both." Laura folded her hands in her lap, armor against the vulnerability in his voice. "You don't owe me anything." "Don't I?" He laughed without humor. "I accused you of... God, I don't even know what I was accusing you of. Betrayal? As if you owe me fidelity when you're right. You're my employee, not my..." He trailed off, took another drink. "Tell me about Chicago." The subject changed through her. "What?" "You said you're from Chicago. Tell me about it. About why you left." He set down the glass and moved around the desk, perching on its edge closer to her but still not touching. "Tell me why you're in Korea, thousands of miles from home, working as a maid when you speak 3 languages and have a degree in international relations." Laura's breath caught. "How did you..." "I know things, Laura. It's what keeps me alive in my world." His gaze was too knowing, too penetrating. What I can't figure out is what you're running from. And yes, you're running. I recognize it because I've seen it in the mirror enough times." She should have been angry about the invasion of privacy, about him digging into her background. Instead, she felt exposed, raw. "It's not your concern. Humor me anyway." The words came before she could stop them, pulled out by the genuine interest in his eyes, the late hour, the exhaustion of carrying her story alone. "My family wasn't family, not really. My father's hands were—" She stopped, swallowed hard. "I left the day I turned 18 with $300 and a one-way ticket to anywhere else. Worked my way through college, kept my head down, built a life. Then I made the mistake of trusting someone who turned out to be just like him." Jin Hyuk's knuckles went white against the desk edge. "Did he hurt you?" "Not physically. He was smarter than that. Financial abuse, emotional manipulation, isolation from the few friends I'd managed to make." She met his eyes, defiant. "I got out before it got worse, but it cost me everything. My apartment, my savings, my job. Seoul was far enough that he couldn't follow. And you came here to be alone. It wasn't a question. I came here to be safe." Jin Hyuk was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. "You don't let anyone help you. You work yourself to exhaustion. You flinch when I move too quickly." The accuracy of his observations made her chest tight. He'd been watching, really watching, seeing details she thought she'd hidden. "I'm fine. You're surviving. There's a difference." He shifted, and she tensed instinctively. He froze, pain flashing across his features. "See? That, right there. You think I'm going to—" He pressed his hands to his face, exhaling hard. "Laura, I would never hurt you. Never. You're a dangerous man, Jin Hyuk. Your world is violence. My world, yes, but not with you. Never with you." He stood, and she stood with him, prepared to flee. But he didn't advance. Instead, he caught her wrist with a touch so gentle she could have pulled away easily. "I'm not trying to control you. I'm trying to understand why I can't stop thinking about you." The confession landed between them like a grenade with the pin pulled. Laura's pulse thundered in her ears, her wrist burning where his fingers circled it. She could see his heartbeat in the hollow of his throat, rapid as her own. "Jin Hyuk." 6 months, he continued, his voice rough with suppressed emotion. 6 months of watching you move through my home like a ghost. 6 months of you being the last thing I think about before I sleep, and the first thing I look for when I wake. 6 months of telling myself it's just proximity, just attraction, just—" He laughed bitterly. "But it's not just anything, is it?" "This is a bad idea," Laura whispered, even as she found herself unable to pull away. "I know." His thumb traced the rapid flutter of her pulse. "Tell me to stop. Tell me you feel nothing and I'll never mention it again." She opened her mouth to say exactly that, to lie convincingly and rebuild the walls between them. But standing there at 2 a.m. with his fingers gentle on her wrist and his eyes holding hers with devastating honesty, the words wouldn't come. Dawn arrived too soon, and with too little sleep. Laura had managed perhaps 3 hours after finally escaping Jin Hyuk's study without answering his challenge, without admitting the truth that terrified her. She'd fled to her room, with his words echoing in her skull, had pressed her hands to her face, and tried to remember all the reasons why this couldn't happen. By 7 a.m., she was in the kitchen, throwing herself into the familiar routine of breakfast preparation with desperate focus. Routine was safe, routine was controllable, routine wouldn't look at her with those dark eyes and ask questions that threatened to unravel everything she'd built. The coffee machine hissed and gurgled, filling the kitchen with the rich aroma of Jin Hyuk's preferred dark roast. She was measuring out rice for the cooker when she heard his footsteps, earlier than usual, his gait less assured than normal. "Good morning." Laura didn't turn around. "Good morning, Mr. Jin." The formality hung in the air like a slap. She heard him exhale, heard the whisper of expensive fabric as he moved closer. "Laura, your coffee will be ready in 3 minutes. Would you like breakfast now or look at me?" It was the please in his voice that did it, unspoken but unmistakable. She turned slowly, steeling herself for what she'd see. Jin Hyuk stood in the kitchen doorway in casual clothes, dark jeans and a fitted black t-shirt that made him look younger, less dangerous, more human. His hair was still damp from the shower, and there were shadows under his eyes that matched her own. In his hands was a coffee mug. Her coffee mug, the one with the chipped handle she'd claimed from the back of his cabinet. "How do you like your coffee?" he asked quietly. "You know how I like my coffee. I make it every morning." "I know you make it. I've never paid attention to how you make it." He moved to the counter, his movements careful, deliberate. "But I've been watching. 2 sugars, cream until it's the color of caramel, heated for exactly 90 seconds in the microwave because you like it almost too hot to drink." Laura's throat constricted as she watched him prepare her coffee with meticulous attention, his hands steady despite the tension radiating from his frame. When he finished, he held it out to her, an offering, a gesture, a symbol of something shifting between them. "I don't need you to make my coffee," she said, but she took the mug anyway, her fingers brushing his. The contact sent electricity up her arm. "I know you don't need me to. I wanted to." His eyes searched hers. "Did you sleep? Did you? Not really?" A ghost of a smile crossed his lips. "Kept thinking about a question I asked that didn't get answered." Laura took a sip of coffee to buy herself time. It was perfect, exactly how she liked it, prepared with care by hands that killed without hesitation. The contradiction made her dizzy. "Jin Hyuk, take the day off." She blinked at the non sequitur. "What?" "Take the day off. You worked yesterday and you're exhausted. Rest." "I don't need to rest. I have work to do. Your shirts need—" "I don't care about the shirts." His voice rose slightly, frustration bleeding through. "I care that you look like you haven't slept properly in weeks. I care that you're standing in my kitchen at 7 in the morning when I know you were up past 2. I care." He stopped himself, jaw clenching. "Just take the day, please." "No." Laura set down her coffee with more force than necessary. "I don't need you to take care of me. I don't need you to worry about my sleep schedule. I don't need—" "What do you need, Laura?" He stepped closer, and she stepped back. They began a dangerous dance across the kitchen floor, her retreating, him advancing until her back hit the refrigerator. "Tell me what you need, because clearly I'm doing everything wrong. I need you to stop." The words burst out of her, sharp with panic. "I need you to stop being kind and attentive and making my coffee and asking about my life. I need you to go back to being my employer, nothing more." "I can't." "You have to." "Why?" He was close now, so close she could see the fine lines at the corners of his eyes, could smell his shampoo, could feel the heat radiating from his body. "Give me one good reason why, and I'll try." "Because you're dangerous, because your world is violent and unstable, and that's not a reason, that's an excuse." His hand came up, hovering near her cheek but not touching. "The real reason, Laura, the truth." Her heart hammered against her ribs, her breath coming short and fast. They stood inches apart, the morning light streaming through the kitchen windows, highlighting the intensity in his gaze. She could feel herself trembling, could feel the walls she'd built, crumbling under the weight of his proximity, his persistence, his unwavering focus on her. "Because," she whispered finally, the words torn from somewhere deep and honest and terrified. "Because if I let this happen, if I let you in, and you turn out to be like him, like all of them, it will break me, completely, and I've worked too hard to put myself back together to risk that again." Pain flashed across Jin Hyuk's face, not anger at her comparison, but anguish at her fear. His hand dropped. "And if I'm not like them, if I'm exactly who I appear to be with you, then I'm still the maid, and you're still the Mafia boss, and this," she gestured between them, "this still can't happen." The words hung in the air, final and devastating. Laura watched emotions flicker across Jin Hyuk's face, frustration, hurt, resignation, and something that looked dangerously like determination. They stood there, breathing hard, neither willing to close the final distance or step away entirely, caught in the excruciating space between wanting and fearing, between what is and what could be. Finally, Laura whispered, "This can't happen," and fled to her quarters, leaving Jin Hyuk standing alone in the kitchen with 2 cups of coffee growing cold on the counter. Thursday afternoon brought an unexpected visitor. Laura was polishing the dining table when Jin Hyuk emerged from his office, his posture rigid with professional courtesy, masking something darker underneath. "We'll be having a guest for drinks. David Chen will be here in 20 minutes. The name meant nothing to Laura, but the tension in Jin Hyuk's shoulders told her this meeting mattered. She nodded, retreating to prepare the bar cart with Jin Hyuk's preferred whiskey and the crystal glasses reserved for important visitors. David Chen arrived precisely on time, and Laura understood immediately why Jin Hyuk had been tense. The man was stunning. Tall, impeccably dressed in a tailored navy suit with warm brown skin, an easy smile, and the kind of confidence that came from legitimate success rather than fear. He moved through the world like someone who'd never had to look over his shoulder. "Mr. Chen, welcome." Jin Hyuk's handshake was firm, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "Thank you for meeting here. My office is undergoing renovations." A lie. Laura kept her expression neutral as she arranged glasses on the coffee table. "Please call me David, and no worries, this view beats any boardroom." David's attention shifted to Laura, his smile widening with genuine warmth. "Hello, I don't believe we've met." "This is Laura," Jin Hyuk said before she could respond, his voice carrying a warning edge that David either didn't catch or chose to ignore. "She manages my household." "Manages? That's quite impressive." David's eyes sparkled with interest that was respectful but unmistakable. "How long have you been in Seoul? Your accent suggests you're American. East Coast?" "Chicago, originally." Laura found herself smiling despite the weight of Jin Hyuk's stare burning into the side of her face. There was something refreshing about David's open friendliness, so different from the carefully controlled interactions that dominated her world. "I've been here about 8 months." "Chicago, great city. I lived there for 3 years while working on my MBA at Northwestern." David settled into the chair across from Jin Hyuk, but kept his attention on Laura. "What brought you to Korea?" "David." Jin Hyuk's voice was silk wrapped around steel. "I'm sure Laura has work to attend to. Shall we discuss the investment opportunity?" The dismissal was clear, but David raised a hand apologetically. "Of course. Forgive me. I don't often meet fellow Americans abroad." He turned to Laura with that warm smile again. "It was lovely meeting you. I hope we'll get another chance to talk. I'd love to hear how you're finding Seoul." Laura felt Jin Hyuk's fury like a physical presence as she excused herself, but she couldn't help the small flutter of pleasure at David's attention. It had been so long since someone had shown interest in her as a person, not a possession or an employee or a problem to be solved. She busied herself in the kitchen, trying to ignore the low murmur of voices from the living room. 20 minutes passed. 30. She was preparing to bring fresh drinks when she heard Jin Hyuk's voice rise slightly, controlled, but with an edge that made her freeze. "I think we're done here, David. I'll have my people review the proposal and get back to you." The meeting was ending early. Laura moved to the foyer as David emerged, Jin Hyuk close behind him like a dark shadow. David's expression was pleasant, but knowing, as if he'd sensed the undercurrents he'd created. "Thank you for your time, Jin Hyuk." David paused at the door, then turned to Laura with that disarming smile. "Laura, if you ever need recommendations for places in the city, restaurants, bookstores, anything, I'd be happy to help. Seoul can be isolating for expats." He produced a business card with practiced ease. "My personal number's on there." Laura accepted it automatically, her fingers barely closing around the cardstock before Jin Hyuk's hand shot out, plucking it from her grasp with frightening speed. "She won't be needing that." Jin Hyuk's voice was ice. "Goodbye, David." The door closed with controlled force, and the silence that followed was deafening. Laura watched Jin Hyuk pocket the business card, his jaw clenched so tight she could see the muscle jumping beneath his skin. "That was incredibly rude," she said quietly. Jin Hyuk turned to face her, and the naked possessiveness in his eyes stole her breath. "Stay away from him." The command ignited something hot and furious in Laura's chest. "Excuse me?" "You heard me. David Chen is not someone you should be talking to. He seemed perfectly nice." "I don't care how he seemed," Jin Hyuk advanced. "On her." And Laura held her ground despite her racing heart. "You don't talk to him. You don't take his calls. You don't accept his business cards or his restaurant recommendations or his anything. You don't get to dictate who I talk to." Laura's voice rose to match his, weeks of suppressed frustration boiling over. "You don't own me, Jin Hyuk. I can speak to whoever I want, accept business cards from whoever I want, have coffee with whoever I want. Like hell you can." The words exploded from him raw and uncontrolled. "Do you have any idea what it did to me watching him smile at you? Watching you smile back, watching him look at you like he broke off, hands fisting at his sides. Like what? Like I'm a person? Like I'm worth having a normal conversation with? Laura was shaking now, adrenaline and anger and something more complicated surging through her veins. God forbid someone treats me like I'm human instead of invisible. You think I don't see you? Jin Hyuk's laugh was harsh, almost painful. I see nothing but you. Every minute of every day, you're all I see. Do you know what that's like? To have someone consume your every thought, to watch them move through your space and know you can't touch them, can't have them, can't even tell them how you feel because you're terrified of scaring them away? Then what was that? Laura gestured wildly toward the door. What was that display of territorial nonsense if not trying to scare me? That wasn't about scaring you. That was about... He ran a hand through his hair, the gesture violent with frustration. I don't want any man near you. There. Is that what you want to hear? I'm obsessed with you, Laura. I'm completely, irrationally, destructively obsessed with you, and it's driving me insane. The confession hung in the air between them, raw and honest and terrifying. Laura stared at him. This dangerous man who killed without hesitation, who built an empire on fear, who could have anything and anyone he wanted, and saw only vulnerability. Desperate, aching vulnerability that mirrored the feeling clawing at her own chest. You can't be, she whispered. You can't be obsessed with me. Why not? Because I'm nobody. I'm your maid, Jin Hyuk. I clean your floors and cook your meals and try to stay invisible because that's the only way I know how to survive in your world. You've never been invisible to me. He took a step closer, then another, and this time Laura didn't retreat. From the first day you walked into this penthouse with your chin up and your walls high, you've been all I could see. And I've tried, God, I've tried, to ignore it, to be professional, to let you keep your distance. But then David Chen walks in and makes you smile in 5 minutes, and I realize I'd burn down the city just to be the one who puts that expression on your face. Laura's breath came in short gasps, her heart thundering so loud she was certain he could hear it. You don't mean that. I've never meant anything more in my life. They stood there in the foyer, the afternoon light casting long shadows across the marble floor, both of them trembling with the weight of words that couldn't be taken back. Laura could see the truth of his confession written in every line of his body, could feel it in the electricity crackling between them. And for the first time since arriving in Seoul, since building her carefully controlled life, since learning to survive on her own terms, Laura felt her walls begin to crumble. For 3 days, the penthouse became a prison of unspoken words and barely controlled tension. Laura and Jin Hyuk moved around each other like celestial bodies caught in orbit, unable to collide, unable to break away, the gravitational pull between them growing more dangerous by the hour. Jin Hyuk stopped going to his office downtown, conducting all business from his study with the door open, as if he needed to know exactly where Laura was at all times. She could feel his eyes tracking her movements through the penthouse, could sense him in doorways watching her work, could hear him pacing his bedroom late into the night when sleep eluded them both. Laura made mistakes she'd never made before. Burned rice. Forgot to pick up his dry cleaning. Polished the same section of countertop 3 times because she couldn't focus with his presence humming through the air like a live wire. She was exhausted, from the tension, from fighting her own feelings, from the constant awareness of him that had become a physical ache. Friday night, she served him dinner in the dining room as always, setting down the plate of bulgogi with hands that trembled slightly. As she turned to leave, Jin Hyuk's voice stopped her. Sit. It wasn't a command. His voice was too tired, too uncertain for that. It was a plea. Laura hesitated, every instinct screaming at her to maintain distance, to keep the boundaries that had already been shattered beyond repair. But something in his expression, the shadows under his eyes that matched her own, the defeated slump of his shoulders, the raw need written across his features, made her pull out the chair across from him and sit. They were silent for a long moment. Jin Hyuk pushed food around his plate without eating, and Laura folded her hands in her lap to keep from reaching across the table. Why me? The question escaped before she could stop it, soft and genuinely confused. You could have anyone, models, actresses, heiresses, women who belong in your world. Why me? Jin Hyuk set down his fork, his gaze lifting to meet hers with such intensity it stole her breath. Because you're the only person who's ever looked at me like I'm a man, not a monster or a bank account. That's not... Let me finish. His voice was gentle but firm. Every person in my life wants something from me. Protection, money, power, fear. Even the people who claim to care about me are calculating what I can do for them. But you? A ghost of a smile touched his lips. You looked at me that first day like I was an inconvenience, like I was just some guy who expected you to clean up after him. Do you know how extraordinary that is? Laura's throat tightened. I still expect you to clean up after yourself. I know. The smile widened slightly before fading. You challenge me. You push back when I'm being unreasonable. You're not afraid to tell me when I'm wrong. And when you smile, which is rare, so devastatingly rare, it feels like I've won something precious, something that can't be bought or taken, only given freely. The vulnerability in his admission cracked something open in Laura's chest. She thought of all the times she'd caught him watching her, thought he was being controlling or possessive. But what if he'd just been desperate for her attention, for a genuine connection in a world where everything was transactional? You want honesty? She asked quietly. Always. You terrify me. The words came out steady despite the emotions churning inside her. Not because I think you'll hurt me physically, but because I'm starting to believe you might mean everything you say. And if I let myself believe that, if I let myself feel what I'm feeling, and you turn out to be like... I'm not like them. Jin Hyuk's voice was fierce. Whatever they did to you, whoever made you build these walls, I'm not them. How can I know that? You can't. Not for certain. Not without taking a risk. He leaned forward, his eyes never leaving hers. But I can tell you who I am, where I came from. Why I understand what it's like to build walls so high you forget what sunlight feels like. Laura found herself leaning forward too, drawn in despite herself. Tell me. And so he did. Through the cooling dinner and into the night, Jin Hyuk talked. He told her about his childhood in Busan, about a father who saw him as a tool and a mother who died too young to protect him, about being raised by his uncle in the organization, learning that love was weakness and trust was fatal, about building an empire while losing pieces of his humanity with every decision, every compromise, every life he took or ordered taken. I was 12 the first time I saw someone's body, he said quietly, his gaze distant. One of my uncle's associates. He'd been skimming money. They made me watch as a lesson. This is what happens to people who betray you. I threw up afterward, and my uncle beat me for showing weakness. Laura's hand had moved across the table at some point, covering his. She didn't remember deciding to touch him, but now his fingers had turned, interlacing with hers, holding on like she was an anchor. I'm 26, Laura heard herself say. I was in foster care from age 7 to 18, 11 different homes. Some were fine, some were... She swallowed hard. I learned early that the only person you can rely on is yourself, that needing people gives them power to hurt you. That staying invisible is safer than being seen. What happened at 7? My mother chose her boyfriend over me, stood by while the words caught in her throat. Child Protective Services removed me. She never tried to get me back. 11 years in the system and she never even called. Jin Hyuk's grip on her hand tightened. I'm sorry. Don't be. It taught me to survive. Laura managed a brittle smile. Though I'm starting to think maybe I learned the wrong lessons. What do you mean? I thought survival meant staying alone. Staying safe meant never letting anyone close enough to hurt me. But sitting here with you, telling you things I've never told anyone, I'm wondering if maybe survival isn't the same as living. They talked until the Seoul skyline blazed with lights, until the dinner had long gone cold, until the words ran dry and left only the truth hanging between them. Two people who'd survived by staying isolated, now terrified and exhilarated by the possibility of something more. Laura, Jin Hyuk said finally, his voice rough with emotion and exhaustion. I can't promise I won't hurt you. I can't promise this won't be complicated or messy or sometimes frightening. But I can promise that I will never intentionally betray you, never use you, never make you feel small or worthless or alone. Those are the only promises I know how to keep. Laura looked at their joined hands on the table, at this dangerous man who'd peeled back his armor to show her his scars, at the leap of faith he was asking her to take. "I'm scared," she whispered. "So am I. What if we destroy each other? What if we don't?" Jin Hyuk's thumb traced circles on her palm, the gesture achingly tender. "What if this is the thing that finally makes us both feel alive?" In the silence that followed, Laura felt something fundamental shift inside her. The walls she'd built so carefully over years of survival began to crack, letting in light and possibility and terrifying, exhilarating hope. She thought of David Chen's business card, of her planned escape routes, of all the ways she'd prepared to run. And for the first time since arriving in Seoul, Laura wondered what it might feel like to stay. The call came 3 days later while Laura was preparing lunch. She didn't recognize the number but answered anyway, hungry for any distraction from the tension that had become unbearable since the latter incident. "Laura, it's David Chen. I hope you don't mind. I got your number from the concierge. I wanted to check in, see how you're settling into Seoul." His voice was warm, easy, safe. Everything Jin Hyuk's wasn't. They talked for 20 minutes about nothing important. Good restaurants, bookstores, the best places to watch the sunset. When David asked her to dinner, Laura heard herself say yes before really considering the implications. She mentioned it to Jin Hyuk that evening while serving his dinner, keeping her voice carefully, neutral. "David Chen called. He invited me to dinner tomorrow night." The fork in Jin Hyuk's hand clattered against the plate. When he looked up, his eyes were black with fury. "No." "Excuse me? You're not going to dinner with him?" His voice was dangerously quiet. "You're not going anywhere with him." Something inside Laura snapped. "You don't get to tell me what to do." "The hell I don't. David Chen is what? Nice? Normal? Someone who treats me like an equal instead of a possession?" She was shaking now, weeks of frustration and confusion and suppressed desire boiling over. "You don't own me, Jin Hyuk. You never will." "Laura, I quit." The words came out steady despite her trembling hands. "Effective immediately. I'll be out of your apartment within the hour." She saw something break in his expression, saw the exact moment panic replaced anger. "Wait, you can't. Watch me." Laura turned and walked to her room, pulling her suitcase from the closet with hands that shook from adrenaline and heartbreak and relief. She'd stayed too long, let herself get too close, allowed the lines to blur until she couldn't see where employee ended and something else began. This was the only way to save herself. She was folding her clothes when Jin Hyuk appeared in her doorway, his face ashen. "Don't go." His voice was raw, stripped of all authority. "Please, I'll give you anything. More money, complete freedom. I'll never touch you. I'll never tell you what to do again. Just don't leave." Laura zipped the suitcase closed, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. "That's not how this works. You can't cage someone and call it love. You can't control every aspect of my life and claim its protection. Love isn't supposed to feel like suffocation." "Then tell me what love is supposed to feel like." He moved into the room, desperate. "Tell me what you need, and I'll give it to you. I'll be it. I'll change everything." "You can't change what you are." She shouldered her bag, forced herself to meet his eyes. "And I can't be what you need. Someone who'll accept violence as affection, possession as devotion. I deserve more than that. I deserve better." She walked toward the door, and Jin Hyuk moved to block her path. For a moment she thought he might actually try to stop her physically, might prove every fear she'd harbored about him true. But he just stood there, his hands fisted at his sides, his body radiating tension and anguish. "If you walk out that door," he said quietly, "and something happens to you, if David Chen or anyone else hurts you, if you need anything, I won't call you." Laura's voice broke. "Because that's the point, Jin Hyuk. I need to stand on my own. I need to know I can survive without someone, without you, controlling my choices." She stepped around him, and this time he let her pass. At the penthouse door, she paused, her hand on the handle, tears streaming silently down her face. Behind her, she could hear Jin Hyuk's ragged breathing, could feel the weight of his gaze, could sense him fighting every instinct to stop her. "Goodbye," she whispered, and walked out, leaving Jin Hyuk standing alone in his perfect penthouse, surrounded by wealth and power and violence, with nothing but the echo of her footsteps to keep him company. The door closed with a quiet click that sounded like a gunshot in the silence. The penthouse had become a mausoleum. Jin Hyuk moved through rooms that felt too large, too empty, haunted by the ghost of a woman who'd cleaned them, lived in them, breathed life into them. Every corner held memories: the kitchen where she'd made coffee with fierce concentration, the dining room where they'd shared that devastating dinner, the foyer where she'd walked out of his life with tears streaming down her face. 3 weeks, 21 days, 504 hours since Laura had left, and Jin Hyuk was coming apart at the seams. His associates noticed. Park mentioned it carefully after a meeting where Jin Hyuk had nearly put a bullet through someone for a minor infraction. "Boss, maybe you should take some time off. You seem—" "I seem what?" Jin Hyuk's voice was ice. Park wisely didn't finish the sentence. The drinking started around day 5, not enough to impair him. He couldn't afford that kind of vulnerability in his world, but enough to dull the ache that had taken up permanent residence in his chest. The whiskey helped him sleep, helped him stop listening for footsteps that would never come, helped him forget the way she'd looked at him before walking away. Work suffered. He couldn't focus during meetings, couldn't summon the energy to deal with the endless territorial disputes and power plays that usually gave his life structure. His empire ran on fear and respect, but lately he'd been running on nothing but exhaustion and regret. The penthouse staff walked on eggshells. He'd hired a new housekeeper, fired her after 2 days because she wasn't Laura. Hired another, fired her after 1. Eventually, he stopped trying, let the dust accumulate, let dishes pile up in the sink, let his perfect, controlled world slowly decay around him. At night, he stood at the windows overlooking Seoul and wondered where she was, if she was safe. If David Chen had taken her to dinner, made her laugh, offered her the normal life Jin Hyuk could never provide. The thought made him want to burn the city down, but he'd promised himself he wouldn't look for her. She'd asked for space, for autonomy, for freedom from his control. So he gave it to her, even though it was killing him. The doorbell rang at 11:47 p.m. on a Friday night, 3 weeks and 2 days after she'd left. Jin Hyuk was halfway through a bottle of whiskey, staring at financial reports he couldn't process, when the sound cut through the silence. He moved to the door on instinct, hand automatically going to the gun at his waist. No one visited unannounced at this hour, unless there was a problem. He checked the camera feed and froze. Laura stood in his hallway, soaked from rain, her clothes plastered to her frame. Her hair hung in wet ropes around her face, and even through the grainy security footage, he could see her eyes were red and swollen from crying. Jin Hyuk had the door open before his brain caught up with his body. "Laura." Her name came out strangled, disbelieving. "What? I'm sorry." Her voice cracked, barely audible. "I'm so sorry. I know I shouldn't be here. I know I said I wouldn't come back, but I didn't know where else to go, and I—" A sob cut off her words. Jin Hyuk didn't think. He pulled her inside, his hands shaking as he grabbed blankets from the linen closet, wrapped them around her trembling shoulders. She was freezing, soaked through, looking at him with such devastation it made his chest hurt. "Don't apologize." He guided her to the couch, keeping his movements careful and non-threatening despite the panic clawing at his throat. "Never apologize for coming here. Tell me what happened. Are you hurt? Did someone—" "No, yes, I don't know." Laura pulled the blankets tighter, her teeth chattering. "The restaurant. The manager, he said I was hired because he liked my smile. Said he expected me to be grateful. When I refused his advances, he fired me. I can't make rent now, can't afford food. I've been sleeping at a hostel, but—" Another sob broke free. "I hate myself for coming here. I hate that you were right about needing to be careful. I hate that I'm so weak I couldn't even last a month on my own." Jin Hyuk felt rage ignite in his veins, white-hot and murderous. The manager's name, address, and entire life history would be on his desk within the hour. But Laura didn't need his anger right now. She needed his steadiness. "You're not weak." He moved to the kitchen, started heating water for tea with hands that wanted to destroy something. "You're one of the strongest people I've ever met. What happened isn't your fault. I should have handled it better, should have seen it coming, should have what? Accepted harassment to keep a job? Jin Hyuk brought her the tea, sat beside her but didn't touch, giving her space to breathe. None of this is on you, Laura. None of it. She wrapped her hands around the mug, staring into the steaming liquid. I've been so alone, she whispered finally. I thought I wanted independence, wanted to prove I could survive without anyone. But it's been 3 weeks of sleeping in a room with 6 strangers, eating ramen because it's all I can afford, jumping at every shadow because I don't feel safe. And tonight, when that manager grabbed my arm on my way out, all I could think was that I wanted to call you, that I needed you, and I hated myself for it. Why? Because needing people has only ever hurt me before. Jin Hyuk set down his own mug with careful precision, his heart hammering. What if it didn't have to? What if needing someone could be different? Laura finally looked at him, tears streaming down her face. I don't know how to believe that. Then let me show you. He opened his arms, an invitation, not a demand. Let me prove that needing me won't hurt you, that I can be what you need without taking pieces of you in return. She broke. The careful control she'd maintained since arriving shattered, and she collapsed against his chest, sobbing with 3 weeks of accumulated pain and pride and exhaustion. Jin Hyuk wrapped his arms around her, holding her while she cried, murmuring reassurances into her hair, letting her purge everything she'd been carrying alone. I'm so tired of being alone, she whispered against his chest when the sobs finally subsided to hiccups. Then don't be, Jin Hyuk murmured, his lips pressed to her temple. Not anymore. Stay. Not as my employee, not as someone who owes me anything, just stay. Let me take care of you while you figure out what you want. No strings, no demands, just safety and time and someone who, he swallowed hard, someone who loves you enough to let you be free within these walls. Dawn found them still on the couch, Laura curled against Jin Hyuk's chest, his arms wrapped protectively around her. The rain had stopped, and Seoul sparkled with that clean clarity that follows a storm. Jin Hyuk hadn't slept. Couldn't, not when she was finally back, when her breathing had finally evened out, when her fingers were still clutched in his shirt like she was afraid he'd disappear. She stirred around 7, blinking up at him with eyes puffy from crying. For a moment she looked disoriented, then reality crashed back and he saw panic flicker across her face. I stayed, she said unnecessarily. You did. Jin Hyuk's hand moved to her hair, smoothing it back gently. And I'm glad. They sat up slowly, Laura putting careful distance between them on the couch. In the morning light, Jin Hyuk could see how thin she'd gotten, the dark circles under her eyes, the worn quality to her expression that spoke of too many sleepless nights. We should talk, she said quietly. Really talk. About what this is. What it means. Okay. Jin Hyuk poured her fresh coffee, remembered exactly how she liked it, 2 sugars and cream heated 90 seconds, and sat across from her, giving her space. What do you need to say? Laura wrapped her hands around the mug, gathering her thoughts. I'm terrified of depending on you. Every person who's helped me, my foster families, my ex, even well-meaning strangers, they demanded pieces of me in return. My gratitude, my compliance, my silence about things that hurt me. I learned that accepting help means accepting control. I understand. Jin Hyuk kept his voice level, non-threatening. I need you to understand something too. My need for control. It's not about power over you. It's about survival. I grew up in a world where losing control meant death, where caring about someone made you vulnerable. I'm trying to unlearn that, but it's hard when the thought of something happening to you makes me want to lock you in this penthouse and never let you leave. That's what scares me. I know, so we set boundaries, real ones that I actually respect. He leaned forward, earnest. You stay here, but in your own space, your room, your privacy, your autonomy. You can work if you want, not for me, somewhere else where you're valued and safe, but not out of desperation. Never out of desperation. I can care for you, make sure you're fed and safe and have what you need, but I don't get to control your choices or dictate who you see or demand anything in return. Laura studied him, searching for the catch. And if I want to leave again? The question was a knife to his chest, but Jin Hyuk didn't flinch. Then you leave. I won't stop you. I won't manipulate you or guilt you or destroy your other options to keep you here. But I will ask, beg if necessary, for you to let me know you're safe. That's all. Just that you're alive and okay. What are we doing, Jin Hyuk? Her voice was small, confused. What is this? He reached across the space between them, palm up, offering but not taking. Learning to trust, together. Learning that needing someone doesn't have to mean losing yourself, that control and care aren't the same thing. That maybe two people who've survived by staying alone can figure out how to survive together. Laura looked at his offered hand for a long moment. Jin Hyuk could see the war playing out across her face, fear and hope, desire and caution, the instinct to run warring with the exhaustion of always running. Finally, slowly, she placed her hand in his. It's going to be messy, she warned. I'm going to panic and pull away sometimes. I'm going to doubt you and test boundaries and probably hurt you without meaning to. I'm going to be overprotective, Jin Hyuk admitted, his fingers closing gently around hers. I'm going to want to fix things I can't fix and control things I shouldn't control. I'm going to frustrate you and scare you and make mistakes. So we're both disasters. Perfectly matched disasters. He smiled, the first real smile in 3 weeks. But honest disasters, trying disasters, that has to count for something. Laura's answering smile was tentative but genuine. Okay, we try. Together? Honestly? Together, Jin Hyuk echoed and lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles that felt like a promise. Honestly. They sat there as Seoul woke up around them, hands joined, both terrified but willing, two broken people trying to figure out if their jagged edges might fit together instead of just cutting deeper wounds. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't even close to perfect.